Greetings, Culturians, and welcome back to the channel. Of course, I'm not doing a review video here. I'm simply talking about 28 years later, The Bone Temple, and the fact that Jimmy's gang didn't really interest anybody. Now, some of that may be due to the fact that the previous film was such utter trash, according to people like me, but a lot of people have thought a little more highly of the current film. Bone Temple seems to ring a bell, especially with British folks, and especially with folks like The Critical Drinker and Nate from Mr. H Reviews. Both of their reviews are up on their respective channels, and both of them kind of enjoyed the film, despite the fact that it was, well, directed by Nia DaCosta, whose massive failure with the Marvels didn't prevent anybody from hiring her for another somewhat high-profile project. Now, while this does seem to resonate with people who like gory horror, it just doesn't seem to have the mass appeal that something like this needs to. And it may be, as a result, something that despite the early green light on a third film in this particular sequence, it'll never really materialize, especially with the earnings. So, flop? Yes. Worse than we thought? Probably. Here we go. Now, before we get started, just a real quick reminder, I'm trying to get to 50K, so if you look down there and you see that that subscribe button is red and not gray, double check you're still subscribed. Click the button, turn it gray, and then hit the notification bell. That way you don't miss anything if you turn on all notifications. And I would appreciate that. I think you will too, because I do dozens of videos and live streams, if you add them all together, each and every week. I'm awfully busy, and that's not just on this channel. I'm in a lot of other places and on 2 new channels that you'll have access to hopefully by the end of the week. We've got a lot to talk about around this, which is 28 years later, The Bone Temple. Now, I've grabbed 3 things, 2 articles and just some numbers, because I think numbers are more telling than anything else. 28 years later, The Bone Temple box office massively bombs. Now, Matt wrote this back on the 17th, and by the time you're watching this video, it's probably the 18th or 19th, and you will have some better or maybe larger numbers after a U.S. holiday. But this is playing on a global stage, and despite what it earns domestically, it's that global number that'll make something like this exist at least for one more iteration. I believe that despite the return in the next film, potentially, of Killian Murphy, this other film won't be made. This is just far too much of a loss, especially with the budget. Now, let's look over this article and talk about it. The Saturday update. The Bone Temple box office is coming in well under estimates, with only 5.6 million Friday, including the very low 2.1 million from Thursday previews. At least those are the numbers here in the States. And as a result, the weekend estimates have been lowered to only a 3-day 13.2 million opening and a 15 million 4-day. Possibly lower. This is the follow-up to the film from June, which opened to 30 million and put this one on uber fast track. So that's more than a 50% drop from the previous film to this one, which means that, believe it or not, the previous film matters. A lot of people did not enjoy it and felt like it was an odd kind of a bait and switch into a story you might care about, but then obviously the bad dad trope comes in at the end. And whether or not you like the first, second, or third act of that film, all of the reviewers are coming in on this film, Bone Temple, and saying that it's the first act that's very bloody and very aggressive with its horror, and the next 2 acts are, well, a step away from that, and maybe a little bit more reasonable with the development of Jimmy and his gang. Now, we're going to step away from that. Since I haven't seen the movie, I'm not going to review it, but I'll just tell you that it's not doing what they thought it would do. It's safe to say, according to Matt, that the 28 Years Later franchise is dead, as over half the fans who saw the first one decided against coming out for the sequel. Sony should have likely reconsidered a theatrical release and instead went straight to streaming. It will be there shortly. And you know what? That'll be rather telling. If that prediction comes true, and Matt usually has a good sense of these things, there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be going, oops, what a huge misstep. And the box office numbers are ominous. While 28 Years Later saw a Thursday preview of 5.8 million in June, the sequel only got 2.1, as I mentioned before. Likewise, the box office estimates for Bone Temple's opening weekend are around 18 million, which, I reported just a moment ago, have dropped to 15 million on a 4-day. So these numbers have come down substantially for Bone Temple, and the expectations are well unmet. With a 50% drop from the initial open in June to what it's going to receive for a 4-day release, this is really bad. And of course, the question here is in tongue-in-cheek, is maybe COVID is to blame. No, we gotta stop blaming things on what happened several years ago for things failing now. I mean, honestly, 5 years is quite enough. Previews and reviews don't seem to matter. The reviews from show critics offer more of the same as the first one, with Bone Temple presently coming in higher at 93% in scores over at Rotten Tomatoes and similar sites. The fan score, however, is only 63%. So I'm guessing the fan score for Bone Temple could come in much higher, and I think Matt's right there, it probably will. But 28 Years Later, coming out with a sequel, this was not good timing. Not to mention the fact that I don't think greenlighting a third one before we got this one was a good plan. But then again, what could go wrong with Nia DaCosta stepping in for the previous director and watching Danny's dreams burn down like a forest? Interestingly enough, Jeff Sneider blasted the Bone Temple on X, saying it's the worst entry in the series by a mile. Yikes indeed. And that's actually telling, because Snyder's usually a huge shill, and he's really stepping up for things that step into the narrative space, and the previous film did a bit of that. It's been called out as a woke bait and switch indoctrination, and according to Matt, he has zero interest in seeing it, so you can't even take his story as a review, and I think you'll see that across the board. But we're not done there, because Jordan Rumi over at World of Real writes up a, less than ideal article that I think is worth paying attention to. Bone Temple has a 53% drop from 28 Years Later, so greater than 50%. Sony must be wondering what went wrong when it comes to Nia DaCosta's 28 Years Later. The Bone Temple, as reviews are strong, an 80 on Metacritic, and audience ratings are a tremendous A-, as opposed to a B or B- over on Post-Track from the last one. This one has an A- this time around. And yet, the film has a disastrous Friday at the box office, a tepid 3.7 million tally in total, giving you a 5 million when you include everything, and a 4-day weekend which will finish out most likely at 15 million. And just to put things in perspective, Boyle's 28 Years Later launched with $30 million debut and never really went much farther, because everybody called it out for what it was, which is complete garbage. So what went wrong? Well, to Jordan's eyes, at least, it's fairly clear. Boyle's film turned off far too many people, which is why nobody's showing up for this one, which is why I was surprised that Drinker was so high on this follow-up film, and why Mr. H, over at Mr. H Reviews, was as positive as he was as well. There was immense buzz for it until general moviegoers actually saw the last film, and then because it leans so much on existential crisis rather than horror, it was wildly eccentric and left a bitter taste in audiences' mouths as they exited theaters, and obviously on exit they gave it a B. But Bone Temple received an A-, so that cures all problems, right? Well, not one at the box office, and now Sony is going to be put to a question. Will it continue the franchise? Hard to say. They seemingly greenlit a third entry with Killian Murphy in an effort to build excitement for the Bone Temple, and that has clearly failed to materialize. Given Murphy's participation, I'd expect the third film to be the priciest of the trilogy, probably in the $70 to $80 million range, and this film was certainly not cheap. Regardless, we're going to look at some real numbers from the numbers and acknowledge that it's got about a $30 million start globally, which is what the other one did domestically here in the States. And that's not good. We're looking at a film that will likely suffer down to 15 million by adding the fourth day in, which is kind of a quasi holiday in the US called Martin Luther King Day. But the international box office isn't exactly ripping the doors off either at 16 million through Sunday's numbers. Now, I'm going to look at this overall and say I'm not prepared to say it's a guaranteed flop at this point, but I feel like it already is. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. No matter what, I'm going to try and go see this film, despite the fact that it doesn't have the appeal for me that, a lot of the original material did, and give it my own actual review. I'm not sure if you'll be interested, and I'm not sure if it won't be out of theaters faster than we can say 17 days, but that's what I kind of predict for this. This is going to get the 2.5 week treatment, and then you're going to find it on everybody's streaming service, and that's not going to be a good thing. But those are my thoughts. What are yours? Did you see the movie? Do you think it's a good movie? Do you think it deserves this kind of criticism? Do you think it deserves more money? Do you think that people will show up later after word of mouth kicks this thing up a notch? Or do you think it's going to fall off another 50% in the follow-up weekends? Since there's going to be a building bit of competition as we head towards spring, do you think there's enough there that'll distract people, or they'll go back and watch Avatar again? Or do you think they'll give the Bone Temple a try and those numbers will come up over time and it'll become a cult classic? I'm curious. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments section below. And as always, be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, and until next time, see ya! But probably not to see this movie a couple of times. Good gracious.